Cowboys. This is an informational text. Question of the week. What can we learn about cowboys' traditions? If you were out west about 100 years ago, you might have heard a cowboy yelling, "Dee yippee yo!" as he rode across the plains. What was it like to be a cowboy way back then? What was it like to be a cowboy way back then? Cowboys lived on cattle ranches. A ranch had a house for the rancher and his family, barns for animals, and a bunkhouse where the cowboys slept. The rancher owned thousands of cattle. They wandered for miles looking for grass and water. Twice a year, the cowboys drove all the cattle together. This was called a roundup. The cowboys counted the baby calves that had been born since the last roundup. The biggest cattle were chosen to set all the market. A roundup was hard work. The cattle were killed and fast. The cattle were wild and fast. They had long, sharp, dangerous horns. Cowboys called them longhorns. If you made a longhorn mad, it will charge at you. It will charge at you. A cowboy didn't want to get close to an angry longhorn. So he made a loop in the end of his rope, then he twirled it over his head and let it fly. When he caught the long horn, horn, he could tell that it belonged to his ranch. How could he tell? It was easy. Each rancher put a special mark called a brand on his cowboys. Baby calves didn't have brands yet. They didn't need them. A baby calf always followed its mother. Every ranch had its own name and its own brand. The rocking chair ranch brand looks like a rocking chair. The flying five ranch brand looked like this. After the roundup was over, it was time to sell the longhorns. That meant taking them to big market towns. Back then, there were no roads across the wide plains, only dusty trails that cattle had made with their hooves as they tramped along. Some trails were 1,000 miles long. Since cattle could walk only 15 miles a day, the long, hard trip often lasted months. It was called a trail drive. There was a lot to do to get ready. At the beginning of a trail day, when Cowboy rode out in front of the herd, "Come on, boys," he called to the cattle. A few big longhorns started after him. They bellowed and swung their heads from side to side. Other cattle followed, and soon they were all on their way. Cattle didn't like so much walking. After a while, they wanted to turn around and go home. Cowboys rode up and down the sides of the herd to keep them in line. A few cowboys rode at the end of the herd to make sure no cattle were left behind. It was hot on the trail. Cowboys wore hats with wide brims to keep the sun out of their eyes. When it rained, the brims made good umbrellas. Around their necks, cowboys wore red bandanas. When it got dusty, they pulled the bandanas over their noses. Leather leggings called chaps were tied over their pants to keep out horns and cactus spines. High leather boots kept out dirt and pebbles. Cowboys' boots had handles called mule ears. The cowboy grabbed the mule ears to pull his boots on. What else did a cowboy need on his trail? A good horse. Cowboys spent the whole day on horseback. They rode little horses called cow ponies. Cow ponies. A good cow pony was fearless. It could cross rough ground in the blackest night. It could swim a deep, wide river. It could crash right through the bushes after a wrong way cow. The cowboy had to hold on tight. Every day, the herd tramped the hot, dry plains. Two and three big steers were the leaders. They always walked in front. The cowboys got to know them well. They gave them pet names like Old Grumpy and Starface. Cows could get in trouble. Sometimes one got stuck in the mud. The cowboy rubbed it and pulled it out. A cow might get hurt on the trail. A cowboy took care of that too. Look at this picture, it's so amazing, isn't it? At night, the cowboys stopped to let the cattle eat, drink, and sleep. It was time for the cowboys to eat too. Cookie had a hot meal ready for them. That's what cowboys called the cock. Cookie drove a special wagon called the chuck wagon. It had drawers for flour, salt, beans, and pots and pans. A water barrel was tied underneath. Cookie gave every cowboy a big helping of biscuits, steak, gravy, and beans. He cooked some meal almost every night, but the cowboys didn't mind. It tasted good. There were no tables or chairs, so the cowboys sat right on the ground. After dinner, they played cards or read by the flickering light of the campfire. The nights were chilly and bright with stars. But the cowboy didn't stay up late. They were tired. At bedtime, they just pulled off their boots and crawled into their bedrolls. A cowboy never wore pajamas. What about a pillow? He used his saddle. Trail drives were dangerous. Many things could go wrong. The best the herd might stampede if there was a loud noise, like a sudden crash of thunder. A stampede was scary. Cattle ran wildly in all directions, rolling their eyes and bellowing with fear. The ground shook under them. The bravest cowboys galloped to the front of the herd. They had to make the leaders turn. They shouted at them and fired their six shooters in the air. They tried to make the cattle run in a circle until they calmed down. Sometimes they had run into rustlers. A rustler was a cow thief. Rustlers hid behind rocks and jumped out to the cattle to make them stampede. While the cowboys were trying to catch the terrified cattle and calm them down. The rustlers drove off as many as they could. When the herd came to a big river, the cowboys in front galloped right into the water. The cattle plunged in after them. The cattle swam mostly underwater. Sometimes the cowboys could see only the tips of their back, noses, and their long white horns. Most cowboys didn't know how to swim. If a cowboy fell into the water, he grabbed the horse's tail and held on tight until they reached shore. Trail drives often went through Indian territory. The Indians charged 10 cents a head to let the cattle cross their land. If the cowboys didn't pay, there might be a fight, but usually the money was handed over and the herd plodded on. At last, the noisy, dusty cattle stamped into the market town. The cowboys drove them into pens